Good evening, traveler. Tonight, I invite you to leave behind the hum of electricity, the comfort of soft pillows, and the glow of your glowing screens. Instead, journey with me back in time, to an era where dawn meant toil and rest was earned, not given. Before we begin, make yourself comfortable in bed, turn the lights off, wrap yourself in your coziest blanket, and breathe deeply. Close your eyes and prepare to wake up as a medieval peasant. A world of early rising, muddy roads, simple meals, and survival. A life of tradition, hard work, and community. And if you enjoy these timeless journeys, please subscribe to the channel and like the video. Welcome to the Sleep Temple. Imagine waking up at the first light of dawn in a humble, smoke-filled hut with walls of packed mud and a roof of thatch. Today, you'll sow the seeds of next season's harvest, prepare a simple meal from yesterday's bread, and gather firewood to endure the biting winter ahead. What did it truly feel like to live a day in the life of a medieval peasant? Let's uncover the quiet resilience and rhythms that define their world. Picture yourself stepping into a medieval peasant's home, your senses adjusting to the muted light and the scent of earth and smoke. The walls around you are made of packed mud, reinforced with wooden beams, sturdy but uneven under your touch. These walls hold the heat in winter and keep the wind at bay, though they sometimes feel damp from the rain outside. The roof above, a patchwork of dried reed and thatch, filters the sharp chill of early morning air, but tiny gaps here and there allow slivers of sunlight and occasionally a drop of water during a heavy storm. This modest structure isn't just a home, it's a shield against the unpredictable forces of nature. A single room serves every purpose, every member of the family sharing the same small space. Look around and you'll see everything one might need to sustain a simple life. A wooden table for meals, uneven but functional, and a few stools. Pots and tools are tucked into corners or hung from the walls, pieced together over time to support daily tasks. A small loft might hang just overhead, offering a bit of extra storage or a place to sleep for the younger children. Beneath it all, the dirt-packed floor mirrors the earth outside, solid and unpretentious, occasionally covered with straw to soften the ground. Despite this simplicity, life inside these walls carries its challenges. The hearth at the center of the room provides warmth, but fills the air with a persistent haze of smoke. The fire glows faintly, but without a proper chimney, the smoke lingers, escaping only through gaps in the roof or an open door. The smoky atmosphere clings to clothes, hair, and skin, a constant aspect of daily life. Light is scarce, with only the fire and perhaps a small oil-fueled lamp pushing back the darkness early in the morning or after the sun sets. In the hours between, the sunlight seeping through a single tiny window is enough to illuminate the interior, though it often feels dim compared to the open world outside. The space is crowded, especially at night. Families sleep close together, often sharing the same straw-filled mattress or resting directly on the floor with blankets made of wool. In homes shared with livestock, a necessity during colder months, life is even more cramped. Animals like pigs or chickens might occupy the corner near the door, their presence adding much-needed warmth but also noise and an undeniable odor that mixes with the earthy air. Privacy does not exist here, but closeness does. This closeness becomes essential, not just for survival, but for building bonds that sustain a family's spirit through trials and routines. Within these tight quarters, relationships flourish in ways only forced proximity can create. Imagine a family sitting after the day's work, children stitching small repairs into their clothing, while their parents knead dough or sharpen tools. Laughter and conversation pass between them, the small room amplifying every sound. The youngest might play with a wooden doll or listen intently to a story of the past, while older siblings practice a hymn learned from church. Even the simple act of preparing a meal becomes communal, each member playing a role, fetching water, gathering firewood, or stirring a pot over the flickering flame that feeds them all. Though the hardships within these walls are apparent, the unassuming home is not devoid of comfort. There is pride in its function, the way the roof holds through fierce winds, or the walls stand firm against a heavy rain. Safety resides here, even when it feels precarious. Outside in the open fields, storms might rage, yet the sturdy home offers a refuge, its small fire a sign of persistence. The familiarity of its creaking beams, or the warmth shared during bitter nights, creates a connection to the space that transcends its physical simplicity. Over time, the home becomes more than its materials, more than mud, straw, and wood. It holds stories, celebrations, and struggles within its walls. Each crack and mark a reminder of a specific moment. The daily routines performed in this space shape its character, imbuing it with memories, both joyful and solemn. A newborn's first cry, a meal shared after a prosperous harvest, or even the mournful quiet following a loss. All are imprinted on the space, inextricably making the house part of the family's history. Now imagine returning to this home after a long day in the fields. Your body aches, but the sight of smoke curling softly from the roof signals warmth and rest ahead. Inside, a pot simmers on the fire, filling the room with the aroma of herbs and perhaps a hint of meat, a rare but delightful treat. The children's quiet laughter echoes softly, their energy undimmed despite the day's labor. You lower yourself onto a wooden bench, the rough grain pressing into your hands but offering a steady place to sit. The evening feels like a reprieve, the constant demands of life fading into the flickering glow of the fire. This quiet, shared comfort is what gives meaning to the simple structure and binds those within it. When reflecting on these homes, it's easy to fixate on the shortcomings, the smoke, the damp walls, the crowded space. And yet, they provided not just the means to survive, but to endure. Imagine the peace of lying down on the straw bed you built yourself, secure in the knowledge that the walls you plastered by hand will hold through the night. It's a steady kind of satisfaction, born from resilience rather than abundance. As the evening hush falls over the home, the space transforms. The smoke thins, the fire dwindles to embers, and the rhythmic breathing of family members fills the quiet. The house, once bustling with motion and activity, now seems to breathe with the family. The thick packed walls hold in the remaining warmth as darkness wraps around the roof outside. The home becomes not only shelter from the elements, but shelter from the unpredictability of life, offering a brief but deeply needed pause before the work begins again. In the heart of the home, the fire never fully goes out. Even when reduced to a soft glow, its significance remains clear. It is the center of everything, a place to cook, to warm, to gather. It is the glue holding the family together, the one constant in a world that could often feel so uncertain. For all its imperfections, this home granted a sense of stability, fostering a quiet strength among those who lived within it. Step out in the morning, and the rhythms of life outside the home begin again. The world beyond the threshold feels vast, the smallness of the house behind you contrasting with the open fields. Yet the simplicity of those tight quarters lingers as a reminder of what truly mattered: family, warmth, and a place that, however humble. Imagine the soft, golden light of dawn slipping through the thatch roof, casting faint patterns on the packed earth floor of the hut. The air, still holding a chill from the night, feels crisp and holds a gentle stillness, broken only by the faint cooing of doves outside or the occasional shuffle of livestock stirring nearby. It's the start of a new day, another thread in the long, continuous cycle of toil and survival. Rising before the sun isn't a choice but a necessity. The rhythm of a peasant's life is tethered to the natural world. the seasons dictating not just what is done, but when and how. There is no alarm clock here. The light and the tasks waiting beyond the door are what summon you from sleep. Your first moments of the day are marked by simplicity and routine. The fire in the hearth, long since reduced to faint embers, needs coaxing back to life. With stiff, chilled hands, a few fresh sticks of wood are laid carefully over the remaining glow. You lean close, cupping the flickers of warmth as you blow gently, watching as the flame awakens. It isn't much, a small crackling fire, but it's enough to prepare for the hours ahead. Nearby, a wooden bucket brims with cold water, drawn from the village well the day before. You scoop it with your hands, splashing your face. The shock of it wakes your senses fully, the icy sting lingering against your skin. From the edges of the room, small garments are pulled on in the dim light, a simple tunic, coarse to the touch, and practical shoes for the day's labours. Each piece feels heavier than it looks, a quiet reminder of the wear and tear required to make them last through countless seasons of work. Before stepping outside, there are immediate needs to tend to within the home. Animals kept inside are restless, pawing faintly in the shadows, or clucking softly if it's the family's chickens nestled in a corner. In some homes, the low grunt of a pig may echo softly, its warm breath clouding the cold air. They are part of the family's survival, each one representing food, labour, or trade, and their well-being comes first. You kneel down to check on them, noticing the way the straw beneath them has already grown damp from the night. It must be cleared and replaced before the day can truly begin. As you push open the wooden door, the first rays of sunlight stretch hesitantly across the land, painting the ground in soft hues of orange and gold. The light feels fresh and clean, and yet there's no time to savour it. The demands of the day have already begun calling. These early hours are crucial for a peasant, every task carefully timed to a natural rhythm. In spring, this might be the time to sow seeds, each one placed deliberately into the soil of the village fields. The action is repetitive but purposeful, a balance between patience and urgency growing with each handful of earth you turn. In autumn, dawn might bring the hurried work of harvest, racing against the shortening days and the looming possibility of rain. Year after year, with each rise and fall of the sun, these are the moments that echo, shaping life's pulse. The mornings, though quiet, demand attention. A parent might be milking a cow by the time the sun fully rises, while older children hurry to carry water from the well for cooking or cleaning. Each motion feels steady, part of an ongoing cycle that begins again and again like the turning of the seasons themselves. Spring brings a sense of careful preparation, where planting must be finished before the sun's heat makes work unbearable. Summer heralds longer hours, where the rising light reveals sprouting fields and growing crops that need tending with constant care. Autumn arrives fraught with urgency, every sunrise a reminder of the limited days left to bring in the harvest before frost sets in. In winter, the soft golden light of dawn might stretch lazily across an otherwise frozen landscape, offering time to focus more on what happens indoors, mending tools, or making stews from carefully preserved food. Even in the simplest acts of preparation, the sunrise marks a focus that feels grounding. For many, the day begins with a kind of prayer, hands dirty with tasks, yet hearts mindful of the passage of time. Thomas, a medieval peasant, once said, "There's always something to do, and rarely anything to show for it." This sentiment is strongest in the early mornings, those pre-dawn hours that seem invisible to outsiders, yet are filled with the ceaseless preparation of peasant life. It's easy to imagine his words, murmured just beneath his breath, as he stands barefoot in tilled rows of earth, a heavy wooden yoke balanced across his shoulders. The demands of the morning aren't just physical, but mental as well. Consider the focus required to rise and begin fulfilling the essential tasks of each day, knowing that, no matter the weariness left over from the previous day, life depends on these routines being met without fail. As the sun creeps higher into the sky, the warmth it offers feels like a brief gift, the light softening the weight of the tools carried over to the field. Wooden hoes and spades, simple yet reliable in their design, must be ready. Their dull edges may have been sharpened the night before in the firelight. The day might hardly feel real at all without these first hours spent marking its rhythm. Many peasants viewed time not as hours and minutes, but in cycles. The crow of the rooster, the growth of a seed, the steady movement of light creeping across the field. Each of these felt more tangible than the ticking of a clock, helping to balance the demands of the day by letting nature determine the pace. Within this grounded simplicity, there is both reassurance and strain. The duties don't wait, but they also rarely change. This balance of repetition and necessity provides a kind of stillness within the effort, an orderliness that contrasts with the unpredictability of weather or crops. For children, mornings often held fewer burdens but carried the same connection to the natural rhythms of life. They might be tasked with simple chores, gathering kindling for the hearth or keeping an eye on sheep as the sun climbed higher. Their laughter could sometimes be heard in this quiet time, a reminder of joy that managed to exist even within the hardship. Later, as they grew older, this carefree rhythm would harden, their shoulders bearing the same tools their parents once carried. But even as a child, the first light represented the pull of yet another day, a life already shaped by the expectations brought with the dawn. By the time the morning matured, the energy generated during those early moments revealed itself as essential. Without food, tools, and animals prepared, the hours ahead would unravel into chaos. And even in that predictability, nothing was truly guaranteed. A sudden rainstorm could wash away freshly tilled soil. Too much sun could bake vital moisture from the land. The connection to nature that carried them forward also acted as a constant reminder of how small their control truly was. For a peasant family, the very same sun offering warmth as it rose could be relentless by midday. Yet within the constraints of this life, there was purpose. The land was tended carefully, not as an abstraction, but as a deeply grounded investment in the future. To rise early and tie each moment to function, even at the expense of personal ease, was to embody a form of fulfillment rooted in necessity. With every sprinkle of water and placement of seeds, a family marked their reliance on and devotion to the earth that surrounded them. As the hours progressed, the energy and preparation from dawn seemed to flow seamlessly into the day. The sun climbed higher, scattering the cool shadows of morning, illuminating the dirt paths that stretched beyond the village homes. For the peasants, this cycle wasn't just something they lived in. It became part of them, imprinted into their choices, their patterns of thought, and even their memories. Every sunrise carried the weight of all the ones before, each one tied to planting, harvesting, repairing, or simply surviving. Standing in the doorway of a small hut, watching the rays filter over the distant fields, you might pause a moment longer. Even within the endless pressure of work, even within the toil of it all, the beauty of the sun's light commanding an untouched world might bring a quiet kind of hope. You take a breath, the coolness of the air rushing in, a steady grounding amidst the tasks that call. Step outside, and the hunger of the body reminds you it's time to eat. Nourishment will fuel what the early morning began. The day continues, and so too does the life tied to this land. Imagine crouching by a small, crackling fire in the center of your humble home. The smoke rises, curling softly toward the gaps in the thatched roof overhead, while the warmth begins to thaw the lingering chill from the morning. In your hands is yesterday's bread, dense and firm after a night's rest. You place it carefully on a wooden board, using a small, dull knife to slice it into portions that will sustain you and your family through the long hours ahead. The effort is slow, each slice deliberate. It has to last. Beside you is a simple clay pot, its contents bubbling gently over the fire as you stir a thick porridge made from barley or oats. This unassuming meal, born from the grain stored carefully in sacks tucked into the corners of the hut, will be your strength for the day. The simplicity of a peasant's diet was both its necessity and its strength. Rooted entirely in what the land provided, meals were practical above all else. Bread was a cornerstone made from grains like wheat, barley, or rye that were painstakingly harvested and ground, often by the family themselves. In years of poorer harvests, the quality of the bread could vary significantly, with barley or oats replacing wheat. Porridges served as another staple, filling and adaptable. When fresh milk was available, it could be stirred into the mixture to create a more nourishing base, though milk often had other uses too, such as making butter or cheese. Then there was pottage, a sort of stew that simmered for hours over the fire, blending together whatever was available: beans, peas, onions, or root vegetables like turnips and carrots. These vegetables, grown in small family gardens, were carefully tended and considered precious. By adding a handful of herbs like parsley or thyme, which could grow easily beside the hut, they coaxed out flavor in even the thinnest broths. Sometimes a lucky family might have access to meat. Pork or beef, when available, was stretched thin, used sparingly to season a larger stew or saved for special occasions. Other times, scraps of fish or a few eggs from the family's chickens could transform a simple dish into something that felt heartier, almost indulgent. Still, the challenge of scarcity loomed constantly. A meal was never taken for granted, and every crumb of bread or bowl of porridge felt both sustaining and fleeting. There was always an awareness that the next harvest could fail, or the preservation methods used in autumn might fall short of providing enough stores for winter. In the colder months, preserved foods filled the gap left by the frozen fields. Salted meats, dried peas, and pickled vegetables replaced the fresh produce of summer. The pottage, once teeming with garden variety, became simpler, heartier, with ingredients soaked overnight to soften before cooking. The bread, too, changed with the seasons. Summer might bring finer grains, while winter often relied on rougher mixes, producing bread that was heavier, coarser, yet just as essential. Freshness was a fleeting luxury in peasant life, though summer was the exception. In those warmer months, vibrant, fresh vegetables like cabbage, leeks, or beans brought color and variety to the meals. Berries, apples, and pears, plucked from nearby bushes or orchards, might sweeten a tiring day. On occasion, surplus apples were crushed into cider or dried for use during winter, preserving a small piece of summer's abundance. This seasonal cycle of plenty and scarcity defined the peasant's relationship with food. Nothing was wasted, not even bones, which continued to flavor broths and stews long after any meat was stripped away. Though meals were simple, eating wasn't just about sustenance. It was deeply communal. Picture this. The thick wooden table, worn smooth over years of shared meals, sits low to the ground in the center of the home. Gathered around it are your family members, each reaching for a slice of coarse bread or a crude wooden spoon to dip into the communal pot. The meal, though modest, brings a rare moment of calm and connection. The youngest children chatter softly, shuffling on the straw-strewn floor, while the older ones sit side by side with their parents, their hands steady as they scoop porridge to their mouths. Laughter, when it comes, feels muted but warm, an echo against the packed earth walls. These moments around the table are stolen from the day's chores, and they mean more because of their simplicity. The preparation of these meals often began before dawn, long before the fire's warmth had properly filled the hut. Tasks were divided carefully. One child might be sent to fetch water from the well, trudging back with the wooden bucket balanced awkwardly against their small frame. Another would venture to the garden, fingers brushing against dew-damp leaves as they searched for a handful of fresh herbs. Inside the house, someone stirred the pot, careful not to let anything scorch in its uneven heat. Each movement served a purpose, small pieces of a larger rhythm tied to survival.
Occasionally, rare luxuries would find their way into these kitchens. A surplus catch of fish from a nearby stream might be roasted in the hearth and shared proudly. Milk from a cow that had calved recently could be churned into butter. The smooth, pale spread slathered onto slices of bread on special days. And though meat was rarely seen on the table in abundance, feast days or festival times sometimes offered a chance to share in a community meal, where roasted meats might appear alongside hearty puddings or pies, made from carefully saved ingredients. In these times of abundance,
meals took on an almost celebratory tone. A ladle of barley stew, usually humble, might be chewy with the richness of leftover bones. Cold bread, normally hardened from sitting overnight, might be softened with a pat of butter or a drizzle of local honey, sticky and bright with sweetness. These moments, though infrequent, left an imprint. They reminded a family of life's brighter corners, even amidst toil and hardship. Food, in its way, had the power to bring hope, however small. After hours of labor, there was a particular satisfaction in sitting down to a warm, nourishing meal. Imagine returning at dusk, your muscles aching and the chill of the air clinging to your skin. The sight of the clay pot steaming over the fire's glow is a quiet relief. Dinner is waiting. Perhaps a bowl of thick pottage, rich with softened lentils and the faint aroma of parsley, alongside slabs of blackened bread, tough but filling. There's nothing extravagant about it, but it feels earned, like the culmination of a day's effort. Each mouthful offers a kind of grounding, a return to something steady in an otherwise uncertain world. The sharing of food extended beyond the family. Meals could also be preparation for the work that would carry on into the community. Bread was traded and bartered with neighbors, sometimes exchanged for milk or firewood when resources were tight. During harvest season, the gathering of neighbors to work the fields meant shared meals in the open air. Bread and cheese passed between hands, cups refilled with ale or small beer. These meals, simple as they were, reinforced the bonds within the village, a reminder that survival often meant leaning on one another. For peasants, every scrap of food held significance, underscoring the fragility of life that revolved so closely around the land. While noble tables might groan under the weight of meats and pastries, the humble foods of a peasant family spoke more to resilience. A loaf of barley bread and a pot of stew might not have been glamorous, but they carried the labor of planting, tending, harvesting, and preserving. They were the product of hands working endlessly through heat and frost to transform raw earth into sustenance. Yet there was beauty in this simplicity. Food connected people to the land and to one another. It mirrored life's cycles, the planting, growing, and gathering reflected in every meal. And it was shared. A slice of bread here, a ladle of stew there, always with the knowledge that scarcity could be alleviated, if only momentarily, by generosity. It was survival, plain and unornamented, but also an expression of care and community. As the fire dies down and evening settles over the small hut, the remains of the meal are tidied away. Perhaps the last heel of bread is tucked into a corner for tomorrow, covered with a cloth to protect it from mice. The clay pot is lifted from the fire, set aside with any leftover pottage to cool. In these small rituals, there is a rhythm that has been practiced for generations. Each act of saving or serving food feels like a thread connecting the family back to those before them and forward to those who will follow. With the meal concluded, there's a quiet satisfaction that lingers, just as the warmth of the fire does. Bellies aren't always full in the way one might hope, but they hold enough to carry on. Inside the small home, the bonds between family and food grow stronger. The fire crackles, the light dims, and the rhythm of peasant life continues. Food wasn't just nourishment in their world. It was a lifeline, a cycle, and an enduring source of connection. Feel the coarse texture of homespun fabric in your hands as you pull on a simple tunic, one made to endure the long hours ahead. The material, rough against your skin at first, slowly warms as you tie it securely at the waist. Its weave tells a story, not of luxury but of utility, crafted to repel the wear of daily life, to shield you from thorns in the fields, from rain in its constant interruptions. The fabric lacks softness and elegance, but it serves its purpose without question, leaving only the hint of lanolin, faint and familiar, clinging to the tough wool strands. For a medieval peasant, clothing was never about how it looked, but how it worked. Every stitch reflected decisions made from necessity. Today, you dress this way not for preference, but to move through life's demands with as little resistance as humanly possible. The process of acquiring clothing wasn't fast or simple. Unlike noblemen or townsfolk who could purchase garments at markets or order finely tailored outfits, each piece of your clothing was touched by hands you knew. Wool, most often sheared from sheep grazing nearby, carried you through the seasons. Perhaps a spouse or a parent spun it into thread, fingers moving methodically over the spindle as the soft fleece became durable yarn. Once spun, the yarn passed to a loom where someone close to you wove it, its rhythm steady, creating a tight, functional weave. The finished fabric was weathered, robust, often coarser than you'd like, but made from the shared effort of—
Few garments arrived ready. Instead, they came from long hours of shared labor, where utility mattered above beauty. For men, a tunic and trousers formed the standard attire. The tunic, carved from simple wool, extended just to the knees, its design boxy, yet flexible enough for the bending, lifting, and carrying required each day. Beneath it, loose trousers, tied at the waist with thick string, provided another layer against cold or stray brambles. On top of this, during the chill of mornings or the height of winter, an extra woolen overtunic might be worn, stitched without flare but effective at trapping warmth. Headwear completed the picture, plain round caps or wide-brim hats, shielding faces from the sun's relentless heat, or keeping the rain from running down the back of one's neck. Women's clothing balanced practicality with the modesty expected of the time. Like men's, a woman's wardrobe depended on tunics, but hers brushed the ankles, providing fuller coverage as she moved between chores inside and out. Layers added warmth, and a linen undershirt usually sat against the skin to absorb sweat, saving the outer dress from becoming heavy with moisture. Over these layers came an apron, a necessity to protect her clothing from dirt while gardening, cooking, or preparing food. In such a world, clothes needed to last as long as possible. Her hair, tucked beneath a scarf or hood, remained tightly secured, not just to keep it tidy, but to protect it during the constant movements of her tasks. A woman's head covering often spoke of her life. It kept her hair from falling into stew pots, yes, but it could also quietly signify her standing in the village or her marital status. A young girl might wear her hair loose, but a married woman bound hers as tradition dictated. Your feet rested in leather shoes, sturdy but unpolished, a daily companion against roads rough with stones or the uneven surfaces of plowed fields. The leather, still smelling faintly earthy, stretched tightly around the sole, held together by hobnails driven into its base. These shoes weren't delicate. They weren't designed for fashion. They simply existed to keep your feet intact. And though they were steady companions, they required care. Scraping mud-free, mending near holes with a fresh patch of leather, small tasks kept these shoes alive for one more season. During colder times, additional wool wraps may line them, a buffer against frost, though they could never keep your toes from growing numb in midwinter mornings. Winter brought its own rhythm to clothing. Layers. Life didn't halt, even under the threat of snow, so you made adjustments. Thick cloaks fastened at the collar fell heavily down your back, their roughness an embrace against the frigid wind as you ventured outdoors. Gloves, stitched hastily from scraps of leather or wool, were rarely fine enough to stop frost from nipping your fingers, but they gave you another barrier. Tunics, trousers, scarves, all were worn one over the other until you could almost feel your own breath trapped between the layers, giving fleeting warmth to the air around you. A good cloak might span generations if cared for well enough. Some were passed down from mother to daughter or father to son, each hem holding the weight of years before. But the clothing itself was only half of the story. How it was maintained explained the rest. These garments, the tunics, the trousers, even the shoes, were not disposable. Every tear was stitched, every fraying hem spliced back together with care. Making a new piece wasn't always an option. Resources were scarce, time even more so. A single tunic, if worn only for easy tasks, might last years. One used for farm labor would wear more quickly, beaten and stained by chores its maker or wearer never imagined while crafting it. Linen undershirts, soft in comparison to wool, required regular washing to keep skin free of discomfort or infection.
Yet such washing was work, and too much of it thinned fabrics faster than they could be replaced. Often you used the same piece until it stretched thin, until it came apart. For children, clothing followed no guide but necessity, often outfitted in whatever garments could be repurposed from older siblings or even borrowed from adults on rare days of idleness. There was no denying children's primary role, to work alongside adults when they could. My sister and I wore the same tunic in alternating weeks, one peasant reflected, a habit likely mirrored in countless households. Their attire was kept light, sometimes a single layer even in cooler months, due to the constant movement of carrying water, herding sheep, or scattering grain. During rest, there may have been small scarves wrapped around their necks, a touch of maternal care in a life otherwise rushing them toward adulthood, but every scrap of fabric was fleeting, as outgrown belongings were repurposed into patches or smaller clothing. Perhaps the most profound tale clothing told came from how it was made. Wool came from your sheep, flax from your fields. Spindles spun not just thread but time itself, the motion rhythmic, enduring. Looms stood in corners of homes, or stretched under canopies where air flowed easy. You remember watching your mother weave, the shuttle darting between taut threads, her hands firm but unhurried. A finished product, a single tunic, might have taken months of careful spinning, weaving, and stitching, so when you smoothed the fabric down over your shoulders or draped a cloak across your back, you wore not only fibers, but hours upon hours of effort, love, and exhaustion. Each piece symbolized survival.
Despite the effort and thought that went into clothing, simplicity never disguised the frugality of materials. Rarely dyed, no purples, rich greens, or blues seen in wealthier halls, your clothing likely bore the natural hues of undyed linen or wool. The subtle browns, creams, or soft grays blended with the land itself. The practical weave blended you equally into your work. No sign of vanity betraying the toil required to create each item. However, these were not marks of shame or lack. Instead, they stood as proof of ingenuity, strength, and adaptability. We were never clean, rarely full, and often cold, but we were alive, as one villager dryly observed of these shared struggles, underscoring how little one's appearance mattered compared to one's resolve. Clothes outlasted their original purpose. When the holes became irreparable, fabric scraps were spun into binding for tools, slings for livestock, or even fillings for makeshift mattresses. A tunic's fabric might eventually line a child's cloak, stitched carefully, holding memory in every patch. This constant reuse wasn't just practicality. It contained its own pride. The same linen binding your trouser cord might have carried grain sacks 2 harvests ago, or had lined a cradle when you were a baby. Life, for peasants, offered no clear moment to discard what could be salvaged. When you tie your hood, pull your gloves snug, and shrug the bulk of your cloak higher against your neck, you aren't simply dressing the way your ancestors did. You are carrying these practices forward. Draping yourself in these pieces means donning not just materials, but actions, histories, sweat, and resolve. The very weight of each layer seems to whisper reassurance, a readiness for the hours yet ahead. You feel the ties cinch at your waist, firm as the earth beneath your feet, protective in their simplicity. Prepared now, the open fields call. The steady labor of the day waits just beyond the threshold. You step outside, your sturdy shoes meeting the cold of the dirt road, the wind pressing faintly against the layered wool about your shoulders. Each stitch in your clothing, each thread woven by skillful hands, wraps you with resilience. The challenges ahead are waiting, and so is the meaning they bring. Picture yourself kneeling in the soil, the cool, damp earth pressing against your hands as you move steadily down a row, placing seeds into the furrows one by one. The sun, still soft and low in the sky, spreads light across the field, and the air is quiet, save for the faint rustle of leaves and the distant sound of a cow lowing. The weight of the work ahead is already present.
But so too is the knowledge that every seed you touch holds the potential for survival, not just for yourself, but for your family and community. For medieval peasants, the land was more than just a place to labor. It was their lifeline, their hope. Every part of a peasant's life revolved around the land. The fields were their source of food and trade, the crops the measure of their year. Grain was central, wheat and barley in particular, though oats and rye filled the gaps when times were harder. Vegetables such as peas, beans, and root crops grew closer to the home, tended with more care because they could be harvested regularly, offering variety to the bread and pottage that dominated meals. There were also trees scattered around the village edges, offering fruits like apples and pears, which, when they came into season, brought sweetness to otherwise plain diets. Livestock also shared in this relationship with the land, cows for milk, sheep for wool, pigs for meat. Each animal depended on the earth just as much as their human caretakers. But survival required more than just planting a seed or feeding an animal. It demanded constant work, effort that began with the first thaw of spring and stretched until winter's frost coated the ground and brought everything to a halt. As the season shifted, so did the duties. In spring, the fields were plowed with rudimentary wooden plows, their edges worn but still capable of cutting through soil. It was slow, painstaking work, with oxen pulling the heavy beams while men guided them over uneven terrain. These early months were crucial. Without the careful preparation of soil and the precise timing of planting, the fields might yield nothing. The year begins in the soil, an old saying might echo, passed from one generation to the next. In summer, the focus shifted to care and vigilance. The seeds sown in spring had sprouted, the fields green with promise, but weeds grew too. This required hours of weeding, moving methodically across the rows to remove what would choke the crops. Hoes, with handles smooth from years of use, struck at the ground while hands uprooted smaller plants. Meanwhile, livestock needed care, their water supplies checked and replenished under the rising heat of the summer sun. Children might be sent to guard flocks, whistling to sheep or scattering stones to keep them from wandering into streams or thickets. Every movement, every effort, was part of a race against time to ensure that the harvest, when it came, would deliver enough to carry everyone through the year. If summer was demanding, autumn was unforgiving. Harvest season began before the light fully broke over the horizon, and didn't end until the faint shadows of stars dotted the sky. Sickles swung close to the ground, slicing through stalks of golden wheat, and leaving piles ready to be gathered into bundles. Women, men, and children moved in unison, each taking a part in the collective effort of pulling the crop from the earth and tying it securely to dry. Any delay, any mistake, could mean losing these precious grains to mold, birds, or unexpected weather.
The work was relentless, the fields transforming from green to bare in just weeks of ceaseless labor, and the air buzzed with the hum of scythes cutting and the low murmur of workers encouraging one another through exhaustion. And autumn didn't only bring the harvest of the crops. It was a time to prepare livestock for the months ahead, slaughtering animals that couldn't be fed through winter and preserving the meat in heavily salted barrels. By winter, the physical labor eased, but the demands of survival pressed on. The fields now rested beneath frost, a quiet pause before the next cycle. For peasants, this was the season of repairs, mending tools, patching clothes, and preparing for the warmer months to return. Some days were spent indoors, weaving fabric or carving wooden handles for broken hoes, while others involved tending livestock that had been brought closer to home. It was slow, deliberate work, the kind of maintenance that went unseen but was just as vital as planting or harvesting. The tools used for all these tasks were as humble as the peasants themselves. Plows, often built from wood with only minimal iron reinforcement, required careful attention to keep them functional. Sickles for reaping and heavy hoes for turning and weeding were passed between family members, each bearing the marks of years of use. A tool is not just a tool, it's survival, a phrase likely muttered while sharpening a blade near the fire. But tools broke often, and replacing them wasn't always straightforward. Sometimes this meant borrowing from a neighbor or trading goods to find what was needed, creating an interdependence between families that reinforced the bonds of the village. That interdependence extended beyond tools. No single family could manage all the work of the fields alone, particularly during the harvest. Neighbors would join together, moving from one plot to the next,
each household contributing to the collective effort, taking turns reaping each other's fields until the work was complete. This wasn't kindness so much as necessity. A bad harvest for one farmer could ripple through the entire community, affecting trades and supplies for everyone. But beyond the practicality, there was a sense of shared purpose. Laughter broke out in bursts across the fields during short rests. Hands exchanged tools when one broke, and meals were shared under the open sky, a steady reminder that, in survival, no one truly stood alone. Still, the land was unpredictable. A season of drought could devastate crops. A sudden, violent storm could flatten them. Livelihoods hinged on forces beyond anyone's control. Imagine standing in the field as rain pours too early in the season, soaking the sprouting crops, leaving you helpless except to wait. Imagine the growing anxiety as you look at the skies, watching the weather change and feeling the tension that comes with knowing your labor and your survival hangs on the whims of nature.
This constant uncertainty hung over every decision. For a family dependent on the land, each season brought relief when it passed without disaster, and the knowledge that another gamble was not far ahead. Yet, even with these challenges, there was something deeply rewarding about tending the land. There's a quiet satisfaction in pressing a seed into the soil and later watching it grow tall, in smelling the scent of fresh-cut wheat as it lies drying under the sun. A well-tended field was more than just a source of food. It was a symbol of perseverance, proof of the hours spent laboring over every inch of soil, every thread of a growing stalk. When the work stretched into the late hours, when muscles ached and clothes clung with sweat, knowing the crops were ripening safely in the fields gave a profound feeling of accomplishment. The satisfaction of harvest burns warmer than fire, a reflection likely passed from one field worker to another as they stacked bundles of golden stalks ready for threshing. Through these rhythms of labor and life, the peasant's connection to the earth deepened. The land wasn't just a means to survive. It became almost an extension of daily identity. A child running barefoot across the freshly plowed furrows or carrying water along narrow paths understood the soil's worth early on. An elder resting against a tree might reflect on decades of harvests, their hands calloused and their eyes tracing the distant horizon that marked their life's work. When the harvest was good, there was relief, perhaps even joy. The sight of full-grain stores and shelves lined with dried beans or salted meats brought not only security, but a rare sense of abundance. Neighbors gathered at the end of harvest, their songs ringing through the weary yet satisfied air as they celebrated another year of life sustained. For just a moment, the weight of uncertainty lifted. Survival no longer felt like an endless loop of labor, but something meaningful, tied deeply to purpose and effort. As you stand in the field at day's end, the sky painted with the fiery colors of sunset, there's peace in the quiet hum of the earth settling into night. The tools you've carried all day rest against a tree, their edges dulled but still reliable, ready for the next morning. The rows stretch out behind you, neat and orderly, seeds already hidden beneath the soil, waiting for time and sunlight to bring them to life. You take in the rich smell of tilled earth, the faint breeze brushing against your skin, and the lingering warmth of the sun on your back. Beyond the toil and uncertainty lies something undeniable. The land doesn't just sustain you, it belongs to you, and you to it, in a rhythm as old as time, unbroken, reliable, and deeply grounding. Imagine the faint hum of music drifting through the crisp, late autumn air, growing louder as you walk toward the heart of the village. Laughter rises and falls, voices mingling in warmth and celebration. The air, rich with the scent of firewood and cooking, feels softer somehow, less like a burden and more like an invitation. After weeks of relentless labor during the harvest, this is the reward, a festival to mark the change of seasons, rooted in both gratitude and relief. For a medieval peasant, these moments were more than just a break from work. They were a chance to step outside the rhythm of survival and into something larger,
a celebration of the land, of faith, and of each other. Festivals like this were rare but deeply anticipated. Daily life was unchanging and grueling, labor that began at sunrise and finished only as darkness swallowed the fields. Tasks repeated endlessly, leaving little time or energy for rest. Yet, here and there, scattered through the seasons or tied to the church calendar, were days when this monotony was broken. On these occasions, the bells might toll not as a call to work, but to gather. The very air of the village seemed transformed on such mornings, charged with a kind of quiet expectation as everyone prepared. Clothing was shaken free of dust and smoothed flat. Food was prepared not in haste but with care, and a sense of lightness filled the streets where weariness usually lingered. These moments had deep roots in both religious and agrarian life. Feast days honoring saints brought spiritual reflection, while harvest festivals celebrated the end of the growing season. The two often intertwined seamlessly, reflecting a world where faith and the cycles of nature were inseparable. The changing seasons offered their own reason to pause, each festival marking a turning point in the year, a signal to prepare for what was to come, whether planting in spring or enduring the cold stillness of winter. These occasions were not simply dates on a calendar. They were anchors in a life otherwise defined by uncertainty and repetition. And so, the village would come alive. Imagine people streaming from their homes, gathering in the central square or the fields just beyond the settlement. Children ran ahead, their bare feet kicking up dust, while elders strolled more slowly, their faces showing a kind of careful joy. These were moments everyone could share. Whether young or old, rich or poor, each peasant found themselves folded into the wider fabric of the community. The day's tone was set by the collective energy, equal parts excitement and relief. The space itself became unrecognizable in its transformation. Long tables were assembled from whatever was available. Planks set atop barrels, rickety benches pulled from households, and adorned with simple clay jugs of ale or cider. The hearth fires burned endlessly, pots filled to the brim with stews thickened more generously than usual. Bread, baked with the last of the finer grains, was stacked high, alongside bowls of vegetables roasted or boiled with an intentional exuberance. Even meat, a rarity on the table, might appear in small abundance. Roasted pork, salted fish, or the occasional bird shared among neighbors. Here, in this moment, food was not rationed or stretched, but celebrated, a symbol of shared labor and survival. The sounds of festivity built throughout the day. The slow rhythm of a beaten drum might start off the music, joined by a pipe played with careless enthusiasm. A group of villagers, their movements unsure at first, slowly took to dancing. Some pairs spinning in circles, others clapping in tune with the beat. The fields that so often called for careful planting and back-breaking harvests now became the stage for feet kicking up dirt in a joyous, uneven frenzy. Children joined in without hesitation, the patchwork of their garments billowing as they raced in and out of the whirling figures. An onlooker might see this and think of freedom, of energy unbound from schedules and demands. The dancing wasn't the only highlight. Storytelling held its place at these festivals, a voice rising above the noise to capture the attention of those seated nearby. Often, it began with history, tales of saints or legends explaining the rhythms of the seasons. But naturally, it drifted into humor or the absurd. A father might recount a strange tale shared during his youth to a wide circle of listeners, each image exaggerated for maximum effect. The room filling with laughter at each turn of phrase. Children leaned forward, eyes wide as they absorbed every word, and even the elders, accustomed to such tales, allowed smiles to trace the corners of their mouths. Games, too, often found their way into these celebrations. Friendly competitions, whether races or tests of balance, entertained the crowd and reinforced bonds among neighbors. In one corner of the square, two men might wrestle, each feigning fatigue for the audience before one finally admitted defeat. Elsewhere, children might toss stones into a circle drawn on the dirt, cheering wildly at each successful throw. These bouts of lighthearted competition drew out the best parts of the community, the joy of play, the kindness of shared victories, and the laughter that bridged whatever differences existed. And then there were the small touches, the details that gave each festival its unique energy. A fiddler playing a tune so lively that even stoic elders tapped their feet in time. A mother setting down a woven basket filled with apples, offering them freely to every child who passed. the village priest blessing the meal before joining his flock and taking the first bites, his solemnity softening as the joy of the moment overtook him. These were sights and sounds that lingered afterward, part of the memories peasants carried into the dark mornings of winter or the long days of planting in spring.
Religious festivals brought an added depth to these celebrations, blending spirituality with the joy of gathering. Take the feast days of saints, marked not just by celebrations but by solemn rituals. Villagers might begin the day with a service in the small church, cramped but lively with song and prayer. Hymns echoed off stone walls, a chorus of voices rising together in devotion before dispersing into celebration. On these days, it seemed as if faith itself intertwined with the food, the music, and the laughter, every action a testament to the connection between the divine and the everyday. Special foods emphasized the significance of these days. Where a typical meal often lacked variety, here there was abundance, and with it a chance to indulge. Honey, reserved for important occasions, sweetened small cakes or slices of bread. Ale flowed in greater than usual quantities, the clay jugs passed along the long tables with little hesitation. Meat pies, stuffed with leftover cuts, otherwise rationed carefully throughout the year, felt like small luxuries. Some feasts even featured rare treats, like roasted hazelnuts or a strong, dark wine kept for festival days. It was the kind of abundance that acted as a reminder of what community, when pulled together, could provide. As the day wore on, the energy of the festival waxed and waned. The sun dipped lower, softening the light over the gathering as it bathed the fields in orange and gold. Dancing began to slow, though the occasional pair might wander back into the square and clasp hands once more, swaying gently as the musicians played quieter tunes. Meals turned into scraps, bits of bread, a few pieces of fruit, scattered across the tables as the jugs of ale emptied. Lanterns were lit one by one, their soft glow creating an intimate aura as the crowd thinned, children slipping into drowsy states while mothers cradled them near cloaks thrown across their shoulders. The laughter and music didn't fade all at once. Instead, it lingered as small groups shared their final moments of connection. Neighbors exchanged knowing glances or spoke briefly about the season ahead, their voices warm and low. Others might sit silently side by side, letting the embers of the fire warm their faces while the night air crisped around them. These final exchanges were not hurried, as though even the weary couldn't quite bear for the day to end. When you think of these festivals, they are not just interruptions in the endless march of work, but moments where the essence of life came into focus. They were built on connection, the shared table, the shared laugh, the shared song. Each person carried the weight of countless labors, but in moments like this, they could lay them down, if only for a short while. They served as reminders of what truly mattered beyond toil and survival. The land fed them, yes, but it was the community that sustained them through all else. As the last lanterns are dimmed and the fire reduced to glowing embers, the festival gradually becomes something of memory. Walking home with your family, the stillness of the quiet night mixes with the warmth of the day just past. The fields you worked not long ago now seem gentle under the moonlight, no longer demanding but peaceful, almost restful. Moments like this slip out of life as quickly as they arrive, but their impact is lasting. You carry the echoes of the music home, the brush of shared laughter still buzzing faintly in your chest. And though tomorrow may bring labor again, tonight, at least, offers a gentler rhythm. The village slows, its heart still warm from the day's joy, its people ready to return, for a time, to the quiet of life. As the sun dips below the horizon and the fields fade to shadow, the weight of the day lingers on your body. Your legs ache from hours in the fields, your hands roughened by soil and tools, but the sight of the soft, flickering light from the hut ahead signals something deeper than mere rest. You step inside, greeted by the comforting glow of the fire, its embers crackling low but steady, pushing back the creeping chill of night. The air is warm, heavy with the aroma of wood smoke and faint remnants of an evening meal. This is the heart of your home, where the rhythms of labor cease, and another type of rhythm, quieter, gentler, takes hold. Evenings after a day of toil feel slower, more intentional. The seated figures of your family gather close to the hearth. Shoulders relax, children shuffle to find their places, and the quiet murmur of conversation fills the room, occasionally punctuated by the soft clink of clay bowls or the scrape of a wooden stool against the floor.
The fire's light dances across the packed mud walls, casting moving shadows into corners where tools lean waiting for tomorrow. Physical exhaustion rests heavily on everyone's shoulders, yet the moment brings relief, emotional comfort that softens the day's hardness. You feel connected in this space, not to tasks or goals, but to the people around you. There's a rhythm to these evenings, guided by necessity but infused with moments of connection. Clothes are mended by careful hands, the needle moving rhythmically through wool or linen. You watch your wife or sister, her eyes focused on the small tear she weaves closed, each stitch a piece of tomorrow's labor secured. Beside her, your son is sharpening the blade of a sickle, the stone moving in slow circular motions as tiny sparks catch briefly in the low light. These tasks feel small, mundane even, yet they are significant. They prepare you for the day to come, ensuring tools are ready, garments are whole, and nothing is left to chance. Nearby, the youngest children are huddled together on the floor, leaning against their mother's knees as she tells a story. Her voice rises and falls gently, each word pulling the family closer into the moment. Tonight, it's a tale of a wandering saint who, through persistence and faith, found his way home. Other nights it might be a story of spirits that roam the woods, acting as both warning and wonder. These stories passed down over generations carry more than entertainment. They teach, they remind, and they root the family in something larger. As the children listen, their tired eyes fight to stay open, eager not to miss what comes next. The meal from earlier lingers in the room. The scent of pottage made rich with herbs from the garden still hangs faintly in the air. In these twilight hours, the family often shares the last scraps of bread, or perhaps a small mug of ale or cider, each sip carrying the warmth of the evening into the body. The meal itself has passed, but the act of sharing endures. Even as tasks continue, the family remains gathered, their proximity a source of quiet reassurance. After a day spent scattered across the fields, tending to animals or fetching water from the well, this closeness feels essential. It creates threads of connection, woven as tightly as the fabric now patched beneath your hands. Preparation continues steadily, but it isn't rushed. Someone might step outside just briefly to check on the animals that share the hut. Returning inside, they might mutter a simple comment like, "The wind's turned colder tonight." Such small observations are exchanged softly, not as urgent warnings, but as reminders of the world outside the fire's reach. Life beyond the walls always lingers, pressing against the thin barriers of thatch and mud, but here in this space it feels held at bay. When the tasks pause, the room seems to breathe with quiet. Stories resume or wander into familiar songs, the kind that require no instrument apart from the warmth of a shared voice. Your family's voices rise gently, not loud enough to echo, but loud enough to fill the space with an ease that even hard times cannot steal. These songs often tell of nature, of flowing rivers and the turning seasons that govern your lives. The repetition of their verses feels grounding, comforting even, as though being reminded that the land's cycles are older and steadier than any one life. What strikes you most about these evenings is the contrast they offer to the day. Where fields demand sweat and strain, here the only work is deliberate and manageable. Where the outdoors imposes great space, the closeness indoors wraps you securely. The quiet is not silence, but it feels like a reprieve, a space that holds laughter, footsteps, and the occasional yawn like treasured sounds. It's the sort of stillness that fills rather than empties, nurturing with its simplicity. The fire, supported by smaller logs now, still burns low. Its orange glow seems to pulse gently, as if mirroring the even breaths of those gathered near it. You can feel its warmth against your face, a soothing balm against the fading ache of your muscles. You watch the flickering light play across the features of your loved ones, and realize that this is where the day finds its meaning. This is survival, too, not in the hard labor of the fields, but in the shared comfort that labor makes possible. Together, you've supported not just life, but the purpose of it, to feel connected and safe, even when so much else remains uncertain. As the night wears on, tasks are set aside, one by one. The mended tunic, now whole, is folded and tucked away. The tools, sharpened and inspected, are stood against the wall, ready for dawn's first call. A child leans against your shoulder, their weight growing heavier as sleep takes hold. Slowly, the family begins to shift. Straw bedding is gathered, and blankets, rough but warm, are draped across tired bodies. The fire burns lower and lower, its embers dimming into a faint red glow. The warmth lingers, but its light no longer reaches the edges of the room. With the fire reduced to its final murmurs, the air inside cools slightly. The contrast sharp after hours spent near the flames. In the stillness, sleep begins to take over. Lying back on the straw, you pull the blanket higher, its weight settling across you like the gentle closing of a door. You can hear the soft sounds of breathing, your own, but also the steady rhythm of your family beside you. There's comfort in that sound, in feeling part of something larger than yourself, even in sleep. These evenings are more than moments at the end of the day. They are transitions, bridges that bring you from the strain of the sunlit hours to the quiet hope of a morning yet to come. They give you time to reflect, not with heavy thoughts, but with the simple awareness of what has been achieved and what lies ahead. They remind you of the pattern you're part of, a rhythm built on family, work, and rest. As you close your eyes, listening to the faint creak of the roof above and the settling of the house around you, you feel a kind of peace that the fields outside never quite offer. The smell of earth and smoke lingers faintly, grounding you in the present. You think about the tools you worked with today, now neatly arranged for tomorrow, and the meal you shared earlier, its warmth still echoing in your chest. This space, though small and far from opulent, feels full. It holds the echoes of old stories, the faint hum of finished songs, and the quiet presence of family.
These hours aren't busy, but they are necessary. They don't ask for effort, only for presence. And in that presence, something larger begins to grow. A capacity to endure, to connect, and to find joy in the simplest of things. It is a balance, a steadying of the soul after the day's labors. And as the fire fades completely and the cool night settles in, that balance carries you, like a soft current, into the depth of sleep. Tomorrow, the cycle begins again. The fields will call, the tools will be lifted, and once more, the demands of life will press upon you. But tonight, at least, belongs to the quiet, this fleeting, essential time where the body and spirit are both given the chance to rest. And outside, beneath the stillness of the stars, the land itself whispers its agreement, waiting with patient certainty for your return. Imagine standing at the edge of your village in the quiet light of evening, gazing out at fields that stretch into soft hills in the distance. For a moment, you let yourself think about the years, how many seasons you've plowed, planted, and harvested from this same soil. The world feels vast and deeply familiar all at once, as though you've lived inside its rhythm for so long that you can't separate yourself from it anymore. Life has always moved in cycles for you, planting and reaping, birth and death, growth and change. The years have carried you forward in a steady beat, not hurried, but constant, each one folding into the next like waves on a shore. From the very beginning, these patterns shaped you. Childhood was a brief season, more preparation than play. When you were small, you learned by watching, how your mother baked bread from the grain your father brought in, how she spun wool into thread with steady hands. You watched your father set to the fields, his shoulders bent under the weight of tools, sun catching in the sweat along his arms. By the time you could string together full sentences, your training had already begun. Your tiny hands were set to feeding chickens, fetching water, or pulling stubborn weeds in the family's small garden. By the age of 7, you worked alongside your mother or father full-time, no longer a child except in size.
By 10, you've grown, the villagers would say, and at 12, you were treated as a fully contributing member of the household. Each new stage of life introduced you to more of the unspoken truths of survival. As a child, your world revolved around small tasks, but as years passed, you came to understand the larger forces that shaped everything around you. You learned that rain could save or ruin, that a healthy lamb could mean a week's worth of food, and that frost, arriving too soon, could leave entire families trembling with uncertainty. These lessons settled into you, becoming part of how you viewed the world, lessons often unyielding but always clear. As you grew older, marriage transformed your world again, pulling you further into the cycle of life. With no pretense of romance or affection, marriages were practical arrangements, families exchanging resources, labor, and trust to secure a future. When the betrothal was sealed, it wasn't possessions but potential that mattered. A husband's back strong enough for planting, a wife's hands capable of managing a small household. These were the measures of worth. Your own marriage, now so familiar it feels timeless, had begun as such a trade. But over the years, something deeper grew between you and your partner, a bond forged less by ceremony and more by the shared labor that filled every moment of your days. Each field tilled, meal prepared, and child cared for became threads in the fabric that held your family together. Your children now follow the paths you once walked. They kneel in the same dirt, feed the same animals, and carry the same expectations that you did. The rhythms of their young lives mirror your own, though they do not yet fully understand the weight of them. You watch as they gather firewood or bring water from the well together, voices light with laughter. Their bare feet are covered in mud, their hands quick as they scramble back inside with their work completed. You think of how easily life flows forward, how time moves with such subtlety that the roles you once filled now belong to another. There is pride in watching them grow, not just taller but more capable. They will carry forward this work, these lessons, this cycle. It is both a comfort and a bittersweet truth. The land has not changed, but you see it differently now. In earlier years, the fields seemed immense, and the days stretched long as you pushed yourself to meet the unrelenting tasks under the weight of the sun. But now, their vastness feels calmer. The fields are familiar, with their edges marked by fences you helped mend, and trees you watched grow taller with each season. You know these rows of soil intimately, recalling exactly where the rocks lie hidden beneath the surface, or where the softer earth allows easier planting. Even in your exhaustion, you find a kind of peace standing among these quiet stretches of land, knowing the work you begin each morning shapes something larger than yourself. You don't labor merely for survival, but to be part of this shared story of growth and renewal. Still, life has not been without its hardships. Storms have torn through these fields, flattening crops before harvest. Disease has come to your village more than once, leaving behind empty homes and freshly dug earth. You have known loss, perhaps the death of a sibling when you were still young, or a neighbor whose absence left gaps in casual songs and conversation. Yet, every funeral has also been a reminder of your place within the community. When hardship strikes, the village answers together. May the last bushel of barley is shared. A fence is repaired by hands other than your own. In times of illness, prayers are murmured at your bedside, neighbors rotating shifts to fetch water or tend livestock. Life's burdens, though heavy, are rarely carried alone. And then there is the church, constant in its presence, anchoring you not only to faith but to this web of life. Its teachings shape your days, its seasons marking time with celebrations, fasting, and rest. Marriage, births, deaths, all are punctuated by the church's hands. The priest's voice rises in prayer as easily as he joins in village meals, offering both spiritual wisdom and earthy advice. Heaven and hell are never far from your thoughts, their promises and warnings woven into every confession whispered in the small stone building that sits at the village's edge. Yet faith also brings a kind of comfort. a steady thread that calms the mind despite life's storms. The seasons turn, and God's hand turns with them, someone once murmured in passing, and it's a thought you return to often, an invisible pattern greater than yourself, holding you steady when all else feels uncertain. As the years go on, your body holds the story of your work. Your back curves slightly, shoulders hunched from the fields. Your hands, calloused and scarred, move slower than before. Teeth fall or wear down, leaving gaps that force you to chew more softly. You feel the full weight of time in ways you never imagined when you were younger. Yet there is a quiet pride in growing older. The work you've done, alive in the crops that sprout every year, and the children who now repeat your footsteps, speaks louder than anything you could say. The aches in your bones, the deep wrinkles on your face, all feel like lines in a story well told. In the evenings, when the fire burns low, you might catch yourself reflecting, not in sadness, but in a steady, measured way, thinking of the things your hands have touched, the people you've laughed and labored alongside, the prayers you've spoken during difficult times. You think of the fields, how they looked in spring with the soil turned dark and soft, or in late summer when wheat swayed golden under the breeze. These images bring a comfort, a gentle recognition of all you've given and all you've received in return. They are your touchstones, proof that even the smallest life can carry meaning.